I would say that in most cases, when we're looking at acquisitions of professional services companies, there are a few things that are really important to me that I like to see, which is, number one, there are the founders, and then there are the people that they've brought into the organization that have enabled that organization to scale. Right. It is that collective, that team that did it. And what I often see founders doing, and I do not buy businesses unless this happens, especially in professional services. I will ask the founders, have you equitized the team?
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah. Many of them have not. Some have. And what I will say to them is, well, I need you to go equitize the team.
Right.
Because you may or may not retire, depending on the situation, but the people that got you here, when they realize you're doing a transaction, and I'm not just talking about transaction bonuses, I'm talking about actually passing some of your equity down to them. I make this the founder or the founding team's responsibility, because what can happen is that there is a massive amount of discontinuity, distrust, disloyalty that can build up on the back end of a transaction when people realize that on the backs of their labor, the only people that benefited from the transaction were the founder or the sellers.
Right.
I don't think it's fair.
My name is Abraham Cisse. I'm the founder of Heliona IQ and host of Heliona Insight, the podcast dedicated to helping managers and teams feel better and work better together. The most powerful thing about successful leadership isn't just the ability to strategize or make tough decisions. It's not just about growing companies or executing acquisitions. The most powerful thing about leadership is the ability to transform challenges into opportunities and ideas into thriving businesses. And today's guest has done that on a scale most people can only imagine. Heck, I'm flying to Chicago to have a conversation with him. With a career spanning 80 countries, over 60 acquisitions, and 4 successful exits, Seth Deutsch has built a reputation as a master of growth, strategy, and leadership. From leading M&A initiatives to scaling companies from 25 million to 2 billion in revenue. Seth doesn't just lead, he elevates entire industries. But here's the twist. Beyond the numbers, Seth's real strength lies in his grit, his passion, and his ability to build high-performing teams that share a common vision. So, buckle up as we dive into the mind of a leader who's redefining what it means to scale with purpose and impact. Seth, thank you so much for being here today. And I want to start this conversation with a question about feeling first before we go into the whole business stuff. I want you to explain to me, how does it feel when you wear, when you dress up during Halloween? Like, what was that like? Because, I saw your LinkedIn post during Halloween and I was like, wait, is this Seth? I literally went back to your profile to figure out whether this was you. That was like one of the best, so much thought went into that costume. So I'm just curious, how did that feel like for you that
Thank
day?
you so much for asking that. Well, first of all, thank you for being here. And we're going to talk about how you're feeling too here in a minute. You have been up since 3 a.m. trying to get here to do this.
Flew from Kansas City.
I get it. There's no easy way. I'm down there all the time. So, Halloween for me is very special. I might actually get emotional talking about it. Halloween for us started when my wife was relocated to Cincinnati. And this is a long time ago. And the block that we were on was big into Halloween. And I'm a competitor. My wife's a competitor. And she's like, well, what are we going to do about this? I'm like, well, we're going to go big. And the first year we were not prepared. Like, we ran out of candy. We had probably 1,500 kids in that community that would come in. Wow. And so the next year I was very prepared. And we had Cincinnati, where we lived, was we had a larger house, we had a big basement, we had a lot of land, And so I could just go wild, and I would get a lot of her staff from PricewaterhouseCoopers to actually come work Halloween with me. And I had different stands. My favorite one was Matt Ray. Matt, if you're listening, please forgive me. I think, forgive me, but I had him in a bloody apron working the body part grill for the kids. That was a great one. That was a great one. Fake body parts on the grill. Fake body parts on the grill, not real. And so we moved here, and I thought that Halloween was going to be over. All of our stuff was in storage. We were living in an apartment. We eventually moved to like a townhome in Lincoln Park. And after COVID, I'm like, I really want to cheer up the kids in the neighborhood, and I want to do something to bring the community together. I need to break out my Halloween skills again. Mm-hmm. And after a few years of doing that, I'm like, ooh, I think I need live entertainment. And so it has morphed. This is my third year of going really big. This year we had 3 fire eaters. We had 10 zombies broken up into 2 zombie dance troupes. We had a DJ. We had a balloon artist. I had a zombie cage. And so that the theme for zombies came about this year because I bought this large animatronic from a professional manufacturer that does these for professional haunted houses and stuff like that.
Right.
And so I'm like, okay, this year's theme is zombies. And then I bring in professional makeup artists to do all of us. And then my neighbors have gotten into it. One of my neighbors flies his adult children in for this. And this was the first year it really hit me in terms of how much this means to our community.
Right.
Our community starts to talk about this in the neighborhood.
Wow.
And next year, so I'm already planning for next year. I've got the petition that I need to start going around door to door and getting everyone to allow me to do a block party next year. And the thing for me would be, if this can live on beyond us, if we can bring this type of joy to the community and to the children and create this type of community spirit and togetherness, because we won't be here forever. We won't be in Chicago forever. We won't be on this planet forever. But that would mean so much to me if what we've created here lives on.
Right.
But yeah, I was a zombie this year, and I had a narrative around it because some kids were coming up to me at S&G Restaurant, which is where I am most mornings when I'm in town. And they had heard about what we were doing. And I'm like, you got to come this year. They're going to be live zombies. And they were maybe like 6 and 8. And they're like, you have real zombies? We didn't know they were real. I'm like, yeah. They're like, how do you get them? I'm like, well, it's really simple. You go to the graveyard. I get some Euro meat from Maria, and I sprinkle it around the graveyards. And every once in a while, a hand will pop up.
Right.
And I become friends with the zombie. And I agree, I'll keep them fed as long as they come and work Halloween. The kids were just really buying this. And I'm like, and by the way, I feed them very well before Halloween, but don't get too close because they might still be hungry. And so I also coached all of our actors that if anyone asked them, this is the narrative. Wow. So I put I started planning. Yeah. Anyway,
there's so much storytelling.
Really long answer to your question.
No, I love it.
But it means a lot to me because of what we do for the community.
Wow. No, and the reason why I even asked that question is because, I saw a quick video, and to me, I just saw the sense of community. Yeah. Even though I knew nothing about what was this about. I saw it. I even saw your image in the comment. Someone shared it, and I was like, "Whoa, this is amazing!" And I looked into it, and the whole point of this this podcast is just focus around culture,
of course,
and also building strong communities. So when I saw that, I was like, you were changing the entire block's culture, doing that. And even me watching that, I am in Kansas City, and I was like, you know what? Next year, I'm going to bring my 7-year-old to this.
Please do. We have a lot of people. We had about 20 people that came in from out of town this year. It has become a reason to get together. And it's all about giving back and creating joy.
I know, yeah. I mean, it's something that I saw. I was like, we need to talk about this because I need to figure out why he did this. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
And the first question that I wanted to talk about, which now I'm going to pivot a little bit.
Okay.
I want to go back to you, Seth. Like, why did you, number one, why did you get into business? Because your first business, which was like years ago, because I looked at your LinkedIn like resume, and I was like, this individual has created so many opportunities for people, and you've worked with so many different entities and industries.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I am curious, like, why did you go into business? What was the reason behind
I didn't
that?
mean to. And we talked about this before we started recording. I'm very uncomfortable talking about myself. And so I will try because you need me to. And I hope that I help some other people not, do better and not make a lot of the mistakes that I made. That's why I do a lot of the things that I do. I still consider myself a coach and a teacher more than anything else. I started my career as a basketball coach. I never intended to go into business. It was the last thing from my mind. Now, I had a number of injuries in high school, actually, that my recruiting dropped off. I was still lucky enough, fortunate enough, hardworking enough to play Division I basketball at a small school called Rice University in Houston, Texas.
Shout out Rice University.
Shout out Rice Owls. Yeah. And my freshman year, I had not played for my junior year in high school. I could barely walk, but I played. Had to have double knee surgery. Came back from that, was likely going to start my freshman year, and something happened. I had a really bad back injury, and 3 herniated discs, and while they were doing my surgery, they discovered I had a congenital issue, and I came back from that, and then I started the next year after having not played for like 3 years.
Wow. And
I think I had like 14-10 my first game back. And I remember my coach, hi, Coach Wilson, coach after the game. And I didn't understand maybe until a few years ago what he meant when he said something to me after the game. And he said, "You're a gamer." Like, and it didn't really hit me. And I understand now when it matters, when the lights are on, when things are at stake, I really show up. And I for a long time, I needed pressure to bring out the best in me. But if that didn't exist, like just going to practice, they didn't really see, and I hadn't played in so long, they really didn't know who I was as an athlete. I can't tell you that I knew who I was as an athlete, but the lights go up and I am on. I am on it. But anyway, I played for 2 years. Knees went bad again. So I ended up having 9 surgeries between the ages of 16 and 19, played for 2 years, and then became a student assistant and became a full-time assistant when I graduated. And my conception of what I was going to do was really one of 2 things. I was going to play professionally, like in Europe or something of that nature, come back and over time become a Division I head basketball coach. Emotionally, I needed to get away from, I needed to take myself out of that environment. I needed to get away from the game. Now I studied, I was the first class to graduate from the James Baker Institute of Public Policy at Rice University. My undergraduate thesis was in conjoint analysis and escalation theory. So I basically majored in war studies. And I had also thought about going to work as an analyst. Well, you have now seen me in person. I am now 6'7".
I know, I was very surprised. I was very surprised because I'm usually next to people that are the same height as me or a little bit taller, but I was like, whoa, you're a lot taller. Yeah, I'm going to be 3 feet away from you.
Yeah,
shake your hand.
And I have to be very careful. I've learned to be very, very conscious over time of like my voice and my height and my size. And these are things that can be actually intimidating. So I have to be, I've learned to be more thoughtful about the impact my size has on people. But I had also thought about becoming an analyst in the CIA, and a good family friend had been in the CIA, was encouraging me to do that. And I just knew that I needed to get away from sports and try something different. And so I started my career at an oil and gas company called Apache. If I had known what I know now, I probably would have stayed a lot longer. But that's where I started. And I started in a associate, kind of like a rotational program. And it's also where I got to work on my first acquisition. At the time, we were acquiring all of the assets of Shell in Canada. And so I got to, as a very young man, I got to work on that deal. But M&A didn't really become, I would say, a full part of my DNA until my mid 30s. And I didn't get really good at it until probably 4 years ago. I think I'm pretty good now. I still make a lot of mistakes, but I think I'm pretty good now.
Like one of the reasons why I created this podcast is because no matter how much I grow, as a business owner, as an individual, I always find myself like, wow, I thought I knew better. Why am I still making the same mistake? So now I created this just to talk to leaders, to number one, learn from them, and also hopefully the listeners can learn from you guys. But like, I want to go back a little bit. You like mentioned pressure when you were playing sports, like you needed that pressure, but at the same time you talked about having to separate yourself from sports. And this is something that I noticed when it comes to corporate America. Just like businesses in general, people tend to identify with the things that they do, and they don't know how to get out of that. But you were able to do that when you were playing sports, to get out of that. Like, what was your like your mindset like?
Well,
back then,
to a certain extent, I would say that. Listen, identity. We could talk for hours about identity. I would tell you that I think in the last few years of my life, I've really, truly come in touch with who I am as a person. And what I would say, and a lot of this comes from just development as a human, because, and I won't go into specifics, but there are many men who don't talk about it, and I will not go into specifics, but I had significant trauma as a child. And so what I would say is that the first thing, when I was about 11 or 12, that's when I got into sports. And that actually became my salvation. It became my way out. It became my identity. I was blessed and fortunate that I had an intellect as well that enabled me to achieve academically. That was a God-given gift. I'd say that my grit and perseverance are God-given. I'd say the other aspect of what I have that I still am coming to realize is that I also have a massive heart and a massive amount of empathy and caring for other people. The things that happened to me did not, it's because of I told myself for a long time it was because of my grittiness, but I have come to realize it's because I'm such a caring person. It's because of my heart. But what I would say is that basketball became my identity. And it in a way, it defined me. And when I lost it, the thing that had saved me, I then lost that. And so I had to, it took me 2 decades to reform and rebuild, because then the next thing that happened is work became really my identity. And because, and I always tell people, I'm not good at much other than getting people to follow me. So I'm decent at leadership, but it took me a long time to realize who I am. I don't wish that journey that I went through, the things that happened to me, I don't wish that upon anyone, but there's a lot of learning in it to share with others. But basketball, was a big part of my identity. I was extremely intense. I was extremely competitive. And what I would say is, for a period of time early in my career, what I ended up getting into was sales, because very similar to sports, right? Black and white, right? There's the constraints right? In an athletic endeavor is
Right.
there's time, there are rules, right? And then there's a definitive outcome. And what I would say about sales, it's a very similar type of thing. There's a
Right.
quota, there's what you have to sell, there are the constraints that you're given as a sales executive, salesperson, sales leader, and then there's a scoreboard.
Right.
And I became, while I was at Apache, I was going through the rotational program, working on M&A, things of that nature. And I got recruited by a software company that liked my exposure to the oil and gas industry, liked the fact that I've been doing M&A, and I went to work for a software company and then another, initially in sales and in corp dev and in channel sales. That first company ended up being acquired by one of the channels I had set up.
Right.
The second software company I went to work for also got acquired by a channel I had set up.
Lucky.
But
And
what I found was that was only using one part of my brain,
Right.
and that it wasn't satisfying to me as a person. It wasn't satisfying to me intellectually. I learned a lot, and I'm glad that I came up carrying a sales bag and having to, make it, myself, and that I had some really good mentors that helped me to develop. And at the time, I thought that my career trajectory was going to be becoming a sales executive, becoming like a VP of sales or something of that nature. But I really just transported myself from one arena to another arena.
Right.
And I still was not fully developed as a person or an executive as I was doing those things, but it served me well, and it led me kind of to the next evolution.
Yeah, and like, again, thank you for sharing your story, by the way, because I always try to tease that and see where the leaders will bite. So thank you.
Of course.
And the reason why I like to ask the question is because in my own experience, I played sports professionally, and I'm also going to do a solid and share my story as well.
Yeah, please.
But yeah, I played soccer professionally, and I traveled, the entire continent of Africa just trying to get an opportunity. But my entire identity was sports. Like I am meant to do this, and somehow I ended up, like losing a very close friend of mine in the process. We were doing it together. Now it was just me, and that's when my identity started like having cracks in it. But it got so bad that I developed a stutter to a point that I'll have constant like panic attacks. And I had an opportunity to go to Norway. I was picked up by Puma. Not like they just picked me on the side of the street, but like, I was recruited, and they were going to send me to Norway to actually try out. But then I was dealing with the trauma that no one knew about. And then it got so bad that I decided to walk away from the game because I felt like I was not good enough, because, the panic attacks started getting bad all the time. And one thing that I've learned from that experience is like, even though I was dealing with all of those things, I had no community, and I didn't have people that I trust that I can go to and like talk to. And that is something that I think it's missing when it comes to just like business or like corporate America. People don't trust their coworkers, and it's becoming such a big problem. And I know in your experience, as someone who works in like M&A, for people listening, mergers and acquisitions, you've worked with so many people. Like, how do you make sure that you were trusted to be in that position to be able to, acquire or like merge?
It's thank you for sharing that, by the way.
Of course.
We're going to continue to help a lot of people by being vulnerable and sharing these things, especially with men. Men don't talk about this a lot. Men don't have a lot of support. I think that part of what has enabled me to gain so much trust is, first of all, I have a track record. I've now been a part of 9 platforms. I've had 4 exits. I've done 70 acquisitions. Some of these things have gone well. Some of them
Right.
have not gone so well. I'm very honest about the mistakes I made earlier in my career and how I've corrected those mistakes as
Right.
I've gotten better, and the wisdom that comes with it. I think the other thing is that who I choose to work with is really, really important. I only work with platforms and founders that I think also really have a strong culture, strong sense of identity.
Right.
I take a look at what we're doing with Litco Law and that platform, the Litco LSO, the Legal Services Organization that we've set up. I'm dealing with a culture there that is incredibly beautiful, but a mission that is to balance the power.
Right.
That's the mission of the organization. And so it's also very easy in a way to find other founders that want that feel that themselves, and that type of mission shows up in their organization, that beyond the money, they have geared their organizations to provide justice and access to justice and to help people. And the way that we operate, for example, in that platform is we have deployed people, process, and technology to actually give lawyers their life back, make it a great place for everyone to work. Most law firms are not good places to work.
Yep.
This one is a fantastic place to work, as are the partner firms that we partner with. And to basically give lawyers their life back and to give them work-life balance and give them the opportunity to help more people who need access to justice. So this actually then shows up in our operating model. And so it's very easy for us to go test these things, to go walk the halls of the firms that we're looking at partnering with to see if they believe in the same things. And then we can see evidently, do those things show up in their operations? But the big part of that building trust is, first of all, being open and honest about who you are, what you believe in, and why you're doing this. At the end of the day, in that particular platform, the reason we're doing this is because we fundamentally believe that the Litco way of operating is better for the populations that they serve and the people that work in those organizations. Right? That's a powerful message. The other thing that we're really honest about is what a transaction will look like, what it will look like going through a transaction, what it will look like after a transaction. And one of the things that, for better or for worse, I always share with people is something that we call the founders or the CEO's post-transaction hangover. And I'd love to tell you about this. I spoke about this on another podcast recently, but and one of the things that we'll tell founders is, hopefully we are being authentic and we are being ourselves and we are being open, honest, and transparent about who we are and why we would like to partner with you. And we're making sure that the seller has very similar motivations. We're very open and honest about valuation, deal structure, what life will look like on the other side of this, the phases of integration, all these things. And we also tell the founder, by the way, it doesn't matter what we do or say in terms of how honest we are and how earnestly you are coming to the table to do this deal. You're going to have a very difficult time when the transaction is closed. Few reasons. Number one, let's just talk about the operations of the business. You will be and your team will be distracted while we're going through the close, which means that the business has been a little bit neglected. Afterward, you are likely, and your team is likely, to going to want to go party. Now, here's the other thing. Most of your employees, the day the transaction happens, it's the first time they've heard about it, and you have deal fatigue. And so we need you to show up for them as much as you want to relax and go party. Remember, you've taken your hands off the wheel. And you're burnout and fatigued, but this is when your team needs you and us more than ever. And no matter what, you were going to go through a period of deep depression for at least 6 months. Because at the end of the day, for all the reasons you said yes, and I can sit here and tell you right now, you are going to be massively depressed because you have sold your baby. You have someone else as technically as your boss for the first time probably in your life. And it's going to set in that your life has changed. You made this life-altering decision that you're only going to make once, and you are going to have loss of identity. You are going to have loss of purpose, and it's going to take a while for you to become yourself again and find yourself in this new environment. So you're going to have regret, you're going to have depression, you're going to have grief. And we're really honest about these, and you still might go through with it. And I want you to know we're going to be with you every step of the way as you go through that process.
Yeah. No, like grief is something that I've been noticing, like a lot lately when I talk to, either CEOs or founders or just business owners in general. And usually it goes down all the way to the managerial level. It's like such an, interesting thing. I see managers, for example, like what you just shared, like a company gets acquired. And those managers have their own teams that they've been managing for years. Now, the CEO that they followed is no longer there, to your point, and they're just now hearing that the company was sold
for the first time. for the first time.
Yeah.
So the thing that the founders, and listen, every deal is different, right? So in some case, I have done deals where everyone knows. I've done deals where one person knows.
Right.
The mean is 2 to 5% of the population knows that this is coming. And, I do not do transactions. When I say I don't do them quickly, I mean that we really take time to get to know people before we commit to a letter of intent.
Right.
Then we move quickly. But in that courtship process, I always say this is a marriage.
Right.
And it's old-fashioned marriage, not the type where you can just annul it the next day or get a divorce after 6 months because this isn't. But as much as you can try to get to know each other, you are still going through a courtship process. You haven't lived together, right? And so, but the rest of the people, they are just hearing it for the first time. So we have to go to extremes to manage two things. And we talk about this, FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We have to also make sure that we are doing one other thing, which is for them answering the WIFMs. What's in it for me? That's the other thing everyone is going to go to. And then there's a third principle, which really comes from the ITW business system, which is USA, which is not patriotic. It is a big U. It is a massive S. And it's a small a. And that stands for understand, simplify, and then take action or automate. As much as we've gotten to know each other, we want to make sure that post-transaction, we are taking 6 to 8 months to really understand one another, understand who your people are, understand what makes your operating model and your culture unique, such that then when we start to take steps to realize our value promise, what did we say to you this journey was going to look like on the back end of it? The first things we want to do are things that take work out of the system, that make life easier for everyone. So by understanding on the post deal, you build trust. By simplifying, you build trust, which then gives you the political capital and the trust foundation within the population, to then do more transformative things from an integration or transformation perspective, which is also why in every single deal I do a transitional services agreement so that we can keep their infrastructure up and running for a year to 18 months, whether or not we need that amount of time. I want to make sure that I am doing no harm at the beginning and that we are taking our time to build trust, allowing everyone to catch up to where the founder was.
Right.
Same point in time, allowing the founder leadership team to regain their confidence as leaders,
Right.
and to come back from their grief cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to allow these things to happen. And what I find is that too many people ignore all of the human dynamics
Mm-hmm.
and just rush in because a financial model or a business plan said something, but it wasn't informed by the wisdom of an experience of bringing families together for the first time in a
Right.
shotgun wedding.
Wow, that is so beautifully laid out. Because I have a similar experience. Back about 6 years ago, I got lucky, and then because I was working really hard, and I got lucky along the way, and I had some really big accounts. Because I used to run a paid media agency,
Yep.
and so I had these massive accounts, which I was not expecting. I was just doing what I loved, and someone saw value in it, and they
Yeah.
hired me. And the contract they offered, I was like, holy crap, I didn't even know they pay people this much to do work that I do for fun.
Yeah.
So I just went and hired so many people. Like most of them were friends of mine.
Yep.
And the reason why I'm sharing this, I want you to tell me what you think about it. I've lived through that. I've grieved. I've apologized, but I made so many mistakes through that process. I just made a bunch of executive decisions without communicating with the rest of the team. And then when I came and actually told them what was happening, they were always like shocked.
Yeah.
Like, what? Wait, why did you do that? Like, and now what I try to do is that during my onboarding process, and also let me know if this is also another mistake. During my onboarding process, I like to communicate with anyone that's coming to my team now and be like, hey, my goal for this company is XYZ.
Yeah.
And I need you to understand this. And I want to understand what is your goal coming into the company so that I can meet you where you are, vice versa, and then also hopefully build trust. For example, my goal could be selling the company in 3 years. Are you
Right.
okay with that?
Right.
So these are things that I've been trying to implement. But then again, I am just going off of my past failure, which
Yeah.
was a huge learning experience. I was like, I was so depressed, like to a point that I grew so much hair, and I didn't have time to cut my hair. And half of the team hated me for making such a big decision without telling them what the decision was. What do you think about that and my current process?
Yeah, listen, first of all, there's no right or wrong, right? And we all go into these things with the best of intentions, and all we can do is live and learn.
Right.
I think that let's start with the first part of this, which is the reality is that, and then there's the whole thing about friends and business and bringing them in. And I am I've become more and more cautious about that, but because the risks I'm willing to take and the things that I'm willing to do with my life, I don't necessarily want to, cross those lines. But in any case, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think the reality is when you're selling a business, there is this thing which is confidentiality. You are bound to an NDA, and at the same point in time, you also need stability in your business because, right, what are we buying at the end of the day? We're buying, I remind people of this all the time, we are buying free cash flow. And the way that businesses get valued at the end of the day is the stability of that free cash flow.
Right.
And a human capital business, which all businesses are to a certain extent, but professional services businesses even more so, are dependent on people. We need them to be there. And so there's this balance that you strike in terms of, am I going to freak everyone out and they're going to leave and then I don't have a sellable asset, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that at the end of the day, you can only tell so many people. You cannot tell everyone in the organization because by hook or by crook, you will violate your NDA. Right. Because people will start talking and that is not good.
Right.
I think that it's tough, and I hope you've stopped beating yourself up so much for this, because at the end of the day, you were still doing what you felt was in your best interest and in the best interest of your employees and in the best interest of the company. And usually what happens over time, they can realize that. But if I back up, I would say that in most cases, when we're looking at acquisitions of professional services companies, there are a few things that are really important to me that I like to see, which is, number one, there are the founders, and then there are the people that they've brought into the organization that have enabled that organization to scale.
Right.
It is that collective, that team that did it. And what I often see founders doing, and I do not buy businesses unless this happens, especially in professional services. I will ask the founders, have you equitized the team?
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah. Many of them have not. Some have. And what I will say to them is, well, I need you to go equitize the team.
Right.
Because you may or may not retire, depending on the situation, but the people that got you here, when they realize you're doing a transaction, and I'm not just talking about transaction bonuses, I'm talking about actually passing some of your equity down to them. I make this the founder or the founding team's responsibility, because what can happen is that there is a massive amount of discontinuity, distrust, disloyalty that can build up on the back end of a transaction when people realize that on the backs of their labor, the only people that benefited from the transaction were the founder or the sellers.
Right.
I don't think it's fair. And I also want those people on the capital table, right, from diminishing key man risk and things of this nature. And so the next time you go to do this, it's not that you're going to tell everyone, but it's really a matter of taking a look at those key people, making sure that they realize, now, you might have already made your decision. You might also be bringing them along and helping them understand why you're doing this, what's in it for them, what you're trying to create, how this fits into the vision. So building that circle of trust with your key people at a certain level is very important, and also equitizing them and giving them agency. This is the critical thing. It doesn't mean that they're going to like what you're doing, but you're now giving them agency and saying to them, by the way, I'm only here because of you as well, not just me. I want you to come along. I want you to love this as much as I do. I want you to meet the buyer, and I'm going to give you equity and make you part of it.
I love that.
These are some of the learnings that should come from it. Now, the other aspect of that, very long-winded answer to your question, but we also have to make these people aware of. And by the way, I share this with every single company that I look at buying or that I do buy, and I remind them, in the lower middle market in the United States, only 1 of 3 LOIs closes. So just because you've signed an LOI does not mean that the deal is closing. Everyone has agency. Things can happen. It's you, me, act of God. Yeah. Right. Like, as the buyer, something can happen to me that I can't do the deal, or I find something in diligence. As the seller, change of heart, deal's over, COVID hits. Act of God. Nothing, can't do a transaction. But I also prepare everyone for that. And whoever I tell on the team, as I'm bringing them into this, I'm reminding them that my intention is to sell the company, but it may not happen. If it doesn't, we need to continue to go on. But now this is now part of our DNA. We are building the company to either become a platform or to merge or whatever that might be. And then the last part of your question, with regard to how you recruit today, the only thing that I would ask you is, I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I would simply just ask you if you feel that you have you overcorrected in any way. There's a balance, but I do like the fact that you are telling key people, this is who we are, this is what we're building, this is the vision for the company.
Right.
And as the founder and CEO of the company, this is also where I envision taking the firm, which will likely look like us either being an acquirer or being a part of an acquisitive platform in the future. Because what you're doing is you are starting to weed out the people that want to just work for a small founder-led or family enterprise. And so I think you are wise culturally, right, to make people aware of your ambition and what might happen and make sure that they are up for that ride. Because again, it builds trust and you're making everyone aware of where you're heading as an entrepreneur.
Indeed.
Well, very long-winded answer to your question.
No,
Great question.
That's perfect. Because, as founders, we're constantly learning how to manage people and also manage ourselves and our time as well.
Absolutely.
Like, where is the balance to make sure that you are not overdoing, which, to your point, I may be overdoing it a little bit.
Okay.
But I think that's needed for where I am at right now because
right.
of the experience that I had. It was very dramatic. It was insane.
I get it.
Like I was, I had, some sense of fear for my own well-being for a very long time.
Yeah.
Just due to the way that they were talking. And I was like, wow, I really messed up. And in my head, I was like, I had great intentions, but I wasn't communicating those intentions properly. I had assumption as to like, they know what I'm doing because they are my friends. And now, I try to make sure that when I will always work with friends if they, if they fit the role. But now I am more careful as to like what I tell them or how I behave with them in the office. Because we were hanging out at the conference room one time and then we were just sitting and not doing anything. And I kind of built that culture within the company where people just show up and hang out. Because we had a mixture of production house, we had a mixture of advertising agency, so it felt like Facebook, 0.1, where people just show up and hang out. So I feel I think I needed to go through that in order to be where I am today and just be able to navigate, because I'm going into that space of working with people, especially in my space. I'm going more towards, mental health and healthcare now.
Yes.
And, I am also learning that it has everything to do with what I just experienced, to a point that my trauma started manifested into things like fear and to your point, like depression, being in this space and the loneliness, portion of it. I mean, it was
the loneliness is a big part, and horror. There's a saying that I often use. It's not a great one. There are a few that I use that aren't great, but I'll say it here anyway. Right?
Hey, let's do it.
The path to hell is paved with great intentions.
You know what? I say that a lot.
It's true.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so there are a few other foundations that I believe in for myself, for all of my companies, for most entrepreneurs, to deal with a few of these things that you just mentioned. Number one, communication, accountability, goal setting, EOS, Rockefeller habits, or some version of it. But having an operating system and a third-party coach, I love EOS, I love Rock Habits. Andy Bailey will be upset at me. Sorry, Andy, founder of PetraCoach, for saying that I love both, but I do. But he's the founder of PetraCoach, which is the largest Rockefeller Habits implementation company in the country. Andy recently had a transaction. I'm really happy for he and his team. But these systems of accountability and transparency, I think, are fantastic for gaining alignment. And then for getting focused on the key priorities, given the goals that we've set out, right? Helping us understand the constraints. And I educationally, I come from, I am constraint theory is part of what I am academically trained in, right? Time, money, resources, human capital, these things, right, that we only have so much, and how we allocate as executives, our job is decision making, allocation, team building, etc. But helping people understand the constraints that we have how we're making decisions and how we are prioritizing, right? These things are really ingrained through EOS and through Rock Habits. And so these are very low cost ways. I mean, I'm talking about $50,000 to $100,000 a year to bring in a professional business system to help you implement these types of things. And those foundational programs are based off of 2 books. One is Traction, which is what EOS is based off of. The other is Scaling Up by Vern Haddish, which is what Rockefeller Habits is based off of. Doesn't really, to me, it doesn't matter which path a team goes down as long as they have that. The second thing is the loneliness, right? And so what happens to us as founders is that we cannot really say what we're thinking fully and unpack that fully and unpack the emotional tumult that is going on inside of us as risk takers and business builders and the pressures that we are under. If we were to dump that on our teams, their heads would it can't happen. And it's also not healthy. That's not healthy. So we have to find other ways to do this. Now, individualized therapy and things of these, awesome, right? However, there are kind of like then a number of things that exist in the world of entrepreneurship to address this. Vistage, EO, YPO, all great, all different. Or your own informal peer group, whatever it might be. Greg Alexander, Collective 54, has created his own peer group coaching platform simply for professional services firms. I love the verticality of it. I've seen others, popping up, but I think that we need release valves. We need to. There are things that make us as founders and entrepreneurs unique. There are pressures that we can take, but the full internalization of that is also not healthy. But you cannot take that release. You can't. Your company is not your release valve. You have to find other places to do this, communities of purpose to do this. And so I highly encourage all founders to also find their peer groups or to engage in Vistage, EO, YPO, whatever it might be, so that they can find safe places to share their full experience with others. It's the same thing in trauma, right? If you think about whatever your trauma might be, whatever that experience is, right, you are typically going to need to be in group therapy with people typically of similar age, similar gender, similar experience. You can relate to one another, and through that, a lot of healing just by hearing someone else's story, right? That sharing can help you process, can help you navigate. And so these things also exist for executives. And I highly encourage both things.
Wow. I am, as we were talking.
I'm glad we're not talking much about me, by the way. I get to just share my thoughts and stuff. I like this a lot more.
I feel like I'm getting like a therapy session, but with a business. Someone who has done such like incredible work, but has the therapy hat at the same time. As you were talking of the term that you shared, like needing a valve to release things, because as founders we use our business as a release. And my wife
or other things.
No, yeah, like my wife will tell me, whenever I start talking about my business, she will check out. Because she works in healthcare. And then she was like, "Hey, I think you need to find someone who, does something similar to you, so that you guys can just talk." Because she's like, I don't know how you fit all this in your head, because I just get so passionate. And I just go, and she's like, "Okay, Abraham,
got it."
She's like, "I got it. I don't know what you're talking about." And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be mean, but I'm overwhelmed. I'm just like, wow, to me, this sounds like ABC. But then to everyone else, and then to your point, we need to be careful how we share the things that are in our head with our team at the same time.
Yeah, because it's really interesting, right? Like, and I learned this very early because, well, very early, probably in my early 30s. So a few things. Let's go back to spouses as well as part of this, right? Like, oh, thank God for them. Like,
Man.
family, spouses, partners,
Right.
dear friends, whatever it might be. They are there to balance us. They're there to support us. They're there to nurture us. And she's giving you great advice, which is wonderful, which is, I can't hold all of this for you. And I'm not the right person to process this with. I need you to find a better outlet. Another thing is then by doing that, we are then able to get that time. Again, I go back to constraints, right? In building businesses, time is the biggest constraint to me of all of them. And we also need our time with our partner.
Right.
And it's like, what do I want the quality of that time to look like? Who do I want to be when I show up with my partner in that time? How do I create the space for that? Which means that, again, some of these things, right, creating something through like a peer group channel, et cetera, actually frees me, right, deburdens me so I can show up for my partner the way that I need to. I think that, with regard to this free form, let's say, thinking or dumping everything, I used to do this when I was very young with my teams. I'm like, they're going to want to understand the 150, because I grew up, again, doing conjoint analysis. So my mind, it was probably God-given. I chose the right academic study in my undergrad career. We'd be looking at, in war studies, look at any conflict in the world. When you start studying that conflict for the first time, well, it's probably been going on for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. Everyone has their desired outcome, and you're trying to figure out all of the things you might do, all of the moves other parties might do, how to influence, form coalitions, and map out your path to your desired outcome. It's really the same thing in business. And so if you think about the multivariate analysis that happens in our heads when we think about personnel, financing, growth, organic, M&A, this account, that account, making payroll, like, constructability of our operating model, constructability of our client concentration, diminishing key man risks, all of these things that we are constantly balancing and sorting to then say, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing the other thing, right? To unpack all of that in front of your team, they are not necessarily built to handle that, nor is it fair to them, because at the end of the day, they want to be led. Now, there are certain things where you bring in inclusivity, right? And you bring in, joint decision making and all these other things. But the whole process of this is only to be shared, I think, the whole process with other founders, because only they can really, or other CEOs, right? Only they can really understand the pressures and the thought process, that goes into it. And by learning from each other, by sharing with each other, the other thing is you learn to feel not so alone in the world.
Wow. I mean, this entire conversation, even though I had a different intention, but I noticed is going deeper into teams and culture, which I love, by the way, because that's like my entire, like, like thesis on leadership is like, at the end of the day, we need to figure out how to do right by our people to make sure that we can scale. But like in your, and this is going to be a loaded question, so be ready for it, because I think
I can handle it.
You've been very good at handling my loaded questions, so thank you for that. I know you've like worked across 80 countries, and you've managed from 25 to like 2 billion in like revenue. Which means you've worked with hundreds and thousands of people. Like, how does culture play in you? Number one, building your trust, because we've talked about trust as well. And number two, how does culture play in also scaling to those high numbers? Just at the end of the day, you being the leader and working in all those different countries,
Yeah.
80 countries, and managing such a
nuts. I
huge
think about it.
number.
I'm like, holy shit! I actually did that.
I'm getting
didn't I?
overwhelmed
Like,
just asking you that
gee,
question.
I can't believe I did all that.
Yeah.
Doesn't. Sometimes I think back on it and I'm like, I have no idea. I didn't know what I was doing, but I hope I
Like
did
people
okay.
just trusted you, like you said.
Yeah.
You just show up and
Yeah.
people like, lead us.
It's yeah, right. Yeah, I tell you, it's interesting. Part of that, a few things, and what I want to do, because you did want me to talk about M&A a bit, and so I do want to maybe tie this to some, and we can always have another conversation, but one of the things that's really interesting that a lot of my work today, I've got one client in South America, but a lot of my work today is in the U.S. and Canada, and I pinch myself. But even like, U.S. and Canada, man, we look a lot alike, we talk a lot alike,
Right.
we sit, but man, the cultures, just fundamentally from a foundation of the country's perspective, one group wanted to break away and start something new from the UK. The other one really kind of wanted status quo. And so there are
Right.
certain things that are like just so fundamentally different about our cultures and everything. But I think what used to take so much time when I was doing that, like when I was running Asia, let's say, and I had to go from New Zealand to Australia and then just even in Australia, Gold Coast, Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, over to Singapore, up to Malaysia, then into South Korea, up to mainland China, up to Hong Kong, maybe stop in Taiwan along the way, then mainland China, and then go to, let's say, Guangzhou, Beijing, Shanghai, and then over to Japan on the way home.
Man.
In a 3-week burst. And to culturally adapt myself along the way while fatigued, while trying to drive business in every single one of those countries.
Right.
And for the most part, in let's say, China, South Korea, Japan, working through translators. You want to talk about trust. And I always believe that control is a fallacy anyway. But my gosh, to think that I'm saying something to a translator who's saying something to another translator who's saying something to the other side of the table. That was a really interesting adaptation for me to get comfortable with the levels of buffering and like, how do I know my meaning is being conveyed? How do I know my spirit is being conveyed? How do, like, all of these things
Right.
Taught me a lot. And so I feel so blessed that, oh my gosh, now I mostly just do this in the US. Holy smokes. Like,
Right.
that's,
Yeah.
wow.
It's like just in your neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah.
But, I think that all of these same principles apply. Meeting people where they are, getting them aligned to what you're trying to do, getting people bought into the process, deploying a system of accountability. I remember when I joined AECOM, and when I joined Eden initially, that's where I learned Eden Business System, which is a derivative of Danaher Business System, ITW Business System. These are the things that EOS and Rockefeller Habits are actually based upon, these systems of accountability and alignment.
Right.
They didn't exist in many of the businesses I went to. And so I was recreating them. Now that's what led me to discover and understand them and then bring them to the companies. But I think that, I take so much time everywhere I go, every business that I'm in, to really put together, define what we think is the right strategy, understand exactly what I think we're going to do along with the team to get there, getting people bought and aligned to that. And then the tricky thing is, as you scale, that scaling journey isn't for everyone.
Right.
Not everyone wants to go do that thing. Even those that do, not everyone can make that pivot. The hardest thing for us as leaders is for people, when they are culturally aligned to us, and have the desire to grow with us,
Right.
but lack the competency,
Right.
in many cases, we are going to have to let them go.
Mm-hmm.
This is the hardest thing. This is the mantle of leadership that we bear. And the thing to remember is that when someone is in a position that they can no longer do, but because you so much want to develop that person, what you're forgetting about, you are thinking about them. And so in a way, you are being unselfish. But what you will tend to ignore because they also typically internally realize that they can't do it.
Yeah.
What you're missing is the downstream impact that they are having on the rest of the organization.
Right.
And the longer you allow that to go on, you allow the cancer inside of them that is inadvertently spreading to metastasize
Right.
into the rest of the organization. These things must be dealt with early. You must constantly evolve and build the team. And listen, you must also do all the right things along the way. Coaching, mentorship, development, board, whatever it might be to give. But when you know it's there, you must absolutely address it. And the other thing about doing M&A, if you are the acquirer, if you are building that platform, whether it is locally or internationally, when I say locally here in the United States or internationally, the most important thing is that you have a solid foundation.
Right.
What you must not do is start bolting on assets, other companies, other families to your house that is in disarray.
Oh, wow.
That's not to say it won't be perfect,
Yeah.
but if you think you're going to acquire yourself out of a mess, you are simply compounding mess on top of mess. You are building instability on top of instability. So the key thing is to take the time to become a platform,
Right.
and then to deliberately go about adding on the next pieces, and to do 3 or 4 slowly and methodically before you pick up pace.
Wow, that is such a powerful statement. Because especially in my age group, and I've made this mistake too, where I was building something, it wasn't ready, and I felt like just getting it acquired will fix all of the problem, and it did not.
It'll exasperate them.
Yeah, it was also another bad experience. I have a lot of bad experiences.
Don't we all?
Because I just think the craziest risk, which I can't even imagine all the risks you had to take in your early, back then when you were in your 30s. Because I'm 32 right now, and sometimes I scare myself. I was like, wait, did I say I was going to do that? This is insane.
Yep.
But like to your point, but making sure that your foundation, just for lack of a better word, is strong to a sense, so that before you bring people into that is very, very important, as you were saying. Yeah. And again, I can talk to you for like 5 hours, I think, but I do want to go into my final part of my questions. I haven't even looked at my questions, by the way. I'm just been, just freestyling here. But I think this part is very, very, very much because me and you connected based off of this. Yeah. I remember talking to you, and then we talked about like Samson Partners, but back then you were trying to figure out a name for it, and then I also learned that it was from your dog.
Yeah.
And I find it to be very, very like just unique and very special, as
thank you.
You being basically everything that you've went through to build and into where you are right now, and you decided to name your company after your dog.
Yeah,
like that is like the most like badass thing I've ever heard. But then it's
like our corporate party was a Halloween block party for the community. I don't know, like that's just what I want to do, I guess.
I love that, and I want to talk about that though, because I know it's like it's been around for a bit, but now you were going all in. Because I remember we like talked about it, and you mentioned
getting ready to.
Yeah, you
slowly.
It's something that you were doing, but now it's becoming real. You're like, all right, I guess I'll do this.
Yeah.
Do you mind talking a little bit about, just Samson Partners, like
Sure.
what it is?
I'll talk a little bit about
And
it.
I want to go into the M&A aspect of it because I think that's
Sure.
very, very important.
Yeah.
As to where we are right now. I have a lot of founders that also listen to this.
Yeah. I've built a lot of businesses with and for other people. I'd never really had a desire to build my own from scratch, which is what I've decided to do now. And I still question myself all the time about that choice. And it is what it is for now. So it was a few years ago when this came into being, and let's call it primordial ooze. Now I'm just crawling out of the primordial ooze. And something had happened. And what I used to do a lot of times, a lot of it was because of my self-confidence, lack thereof. I would just help people, just help them do things. And I'd give a lot of time to other people, help them do things. I did this, I was helping a guy do something, sell his business, had a handshake deal, and it wasn't fully honored. And I was really upset, and I was crying with one of my friends about this, and I realized I'd done this to myself because of my self-conception and my lack of confidence and identity and things of that nature. And so I said, well, I'm going to incorporate just to have it, because the next time someone asks me for help, I'm actually going to charge them, and I'm going to have a contract. I'm going to have a contract because not everyone is as honorable as I am.
Right.
I'm not
but
trying to hold, but whatever. Like if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. Not but the world of business, I don't know that I was ever really quite cut out for it in that way because of the size of my heart, but I'm going to do everything with a contract. And so I was on the phone with my friend Steve Griesmer, who's the co-founder of a private equity fund here in town, May River Capital. I'm like, Steve, I need to incorporate. And he's like, just call it Deutsch Inc. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do something different. And he's like, just make it personal. And so I was thinking about it, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to name this after my first dog, who's Sammy. So we still call the company Sammy, but Samson, who is a King Charles Cavalier Spaniel. Beautiful. And they're very loving companions. They're there for support. And I wanted to really be able to support and help people.
Right.
And in the first iteration, he was drawn as a cartoon, and he had a cape on. And on the cape were two crossed donkey jawbones, because in the Old Testament, and I am not religious, but I am spiritual, but in the Old Testament, Samson slayed the Philistines with the jawbones of an ass. And I had two on there because what I say to I don't call them clients, what I say to my partners, the people that I choose to be in service to, is that I am engaging with you in a noble cause.
Right.
This is war. We're going to be in war together. We're going to be in the trenches together.
Right.
And I will not pick up arms for you. I will pick up arms with you. And so that was the first version of my logo, which at some point in time, people said to me, and they were right, Seth, this is growing beyond you. Other people want help.
Right.
And you need to make this slightly more professional, not just so personal. I said, okay, I got it. Good. So the guys at Vocal just took me through a rebranding. So now it's Samson Partners Group. We've got a different main logo, which I love. We call it the SAMP. It's an ampersand turned around. So it still has the S, but it's with. Yeah. It's together. And they allowed me to keep a mascot.
Yeah.
So I still have, and I'm working with them right now on some merch. I've ordered King Charles Cavalier stuffed animals, and we're going to tie, because Samson, my dog, loved to wear a little handkerchief. So we're putting the SAMP on the handkerchief around the stuffed animal, and so we're professionalizing the brand a bit, but doing so in a way that still captures my heart.
Wow, what a great time I've had talking to Seth. I knew there was value in meeting this individual today, and I hope you found value in all the things we talked about. It was a masterclass of itself. I had to cut it there, and we will save the rest for part 2. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please make sure you do so now, and leave a comment and ask any questions for our next guest. And in closing, I want to share a message of hope for all the frontline managers and future managers out there. Think about all that you are instead of all that you are not. You are capable, brave, and significant, even when it feels like you are not. You face countless challenges but remain resilient. You've been hurt, yet you still stand proud and smile for your people. Embrace your journey, cherish those who uplift you, and remember, your worth is defined by the kindness and strength you show yourself first. Your imperfections make you unique and resilient. Keep shining because the world needs your light. Thank you for listening to Heliona Insight. Until next time, keep inspiring.